You will begin to create out of yourself not unhappiness, but a happiness of such quality and character, that you will wonder if you are living in the same world. As a matter of fact, it won't be the same world, because you are not the same, and what you are determines the world in which you live. So as you change, your world changes also. If happiness is determined by our thoughts, it is necessary to drive off the thoughts which make for depression and discouragement. This can be done first by simply determining to do it, second, by utilizing an easily employed technique which I suggested to a businessman. I met him at a luncheon, and have seldom heard such gloom as he got off. His conversation would have been ultra-depressing had I permitted it to affect me. It reeked with pessimism. To hear him talk, you would think everything was headed for ruin. Of course the man was tired. Accumulated problems had swamped his mind, which was seeking release and retreat from a world which was too much for his depleted energy. His principal trouble was in his depressed thought pattern. He needed an infusion of light and faith. So rather boldly I said, "If you want to feel better, and stop being miserable, I can give you something that will fix you up." "What can you do?" he snorted. "Are you a miracle worker?" "No," I replied, "but I can put you in touch with a miracle worker who will drain off that unhappiness of yours, and give you a new slant on life." "I mean that," I concluded, as we separated. Apparently he became curious, for he got in touch with me later, and I gave him a little book of mine called Thought Conditioners. It contains 40 health and happiness producing thoughts. Inasmuch as it is a pocket-sized booklet, suggested that he carry it for easy consultation, and that he drop one of the suggested thoughts in its mind every day for 40 days. I further suggested that he commit each thought to memory, thus allowing it to dissolve in consciousness, and that he visualize this healthy thought sending a quieting and healing influence through his mind. I assured him that, if he would follow this plan, these healthy thoughts would drive off the diseased thoughts that was sapping his joy, energy, and creative ability. The idea at first impressed him as being a bit queer, and he had his doubts, but he followed directions. After about 3 weeks he called me on the telephone and shouted, "Boy, this sure works. It is wonderful. I have snapped out of it, and I wouldn't have believed it possible." He remains snapped out of it, and is a genuinely happy person. This pleasant condition resulted because he became skilled in the power to create his own happiness. He later commented that his first mental hurdle was honestly to face the fact that while his unhappiness made him miserable, yet he was at home in self-pity and self-punishment thoughts. He knew that these sick thoughts were the cause of his trouble, but he shrank from the effort required to want to change sufficiently actually to go about changing. But when he began systematically to insert healthy spiritual thoughts into his mind as directed, he began first to want new life, then to realize the thrilling fact that he could have it, then the even more amazing fact that he was getting it. The result was that after some 3 weeks of a self-improvement process, new happiness burst upon him. Everywhere in this country today are groups of people who have found the happy way. If we can have even one such group in every city, town, and hamlet in America, we can change the life of this country within a very short time. And what kind of group do we mean? Let me explain. I was speaking in a western city, and returned to my hotel room rather late. I wanted to get a little sleep, for I was to be up at 5:30 next morning to catch a plane. As I was preparing for bed, the telephone rang, and a lady said, "There are about 50 of us at my house waiting for you." I explained that I could not come due to the early hour of my departure in the morning. "Oh," she said, "2 men are on their way to get you. We have been praying for you, and we want you to come and pray with us before you leave the city." I'm glad I went, though I had very little sleep that night. The men who came for me were a couple of alcoholics who had been healed by the power of faith. They were 2 of the happiest, most lovable fellows you can imagine. The home to which they took me was packed. People were sitting on the stairways, on the tables, on the floor. One man was even perched on the grand piano. And what were they doing? They were having a prayer meeting. They told me that 60 such prayer groups were going on in that city all the time. I was never in such a meeting. They were anything but a stuffy group. They were a least happy crowd of real people. I found myself strangely moved. The spirit in that room was tremendous in its lifting force. The group would burst into song, and I never heard such singing. The room was filled with a wonderful spirit of laughter. Then a woman stood up, saw that she had braces on her legs, and she said, "They told me I would never walk again. Do you want to see me walk?" And she walked up and down the room. "What did it?" I asked. "Jesus," she replied simply. Then another fine-looking girl said, "Did you ever see a victim of the narcotics habit? Well, I was one, and I was healed." There she sat, a beautiful, modest, charming young woman, and she too said, "Jesus did it." Then a couple who had drifted apart told me that they had been brought together, and they were happier than ever before. How did it come about? I asked. And their reply was, Jesus did it. A man said he had been a victim of alcohol, that he had dragged his family down until they were living in abject poverty, and he was a complete failure. And now as he stood before me, he was a strong, healthy personality. I started to ask how, but he nodded and said, Jesus did it. Then they burst into another song, and then someone dimmed the lights and we all held hands around in a great circle. I had a feeling as though I had hold of an electric wire. Power was flowing around that room. Without any question I was the least spiritually developed person in that group. I knew in that moment that Jesus Christ was right there in that house, and those people had found him. They had been touched by his power. He had given them new life. This life bubbled up in an irrepressible effervescence. This is the secret of happiness. All else is secondary. Get this experience and you've got real, unalloyed happiness, the best the world offers. Don't miss it, whatever you do in this life, for this is it. Footnote: Self-Thought Conditioners, published by Sermon Publications Incorporated, Marble Collegiate Church, 1 West 29th Street, New York 1, New York. Stop fuming and fretting. Many people make life unnecessarily difficult for themselves by dissipating power and energy through fuming and fretting. Do you ever fume and fret? Here's a picture of yourself if you do. The word fume means to boil up, to blow off, to emit vapor, to be agitated, to be distraught, to seethe. The word fret is equally descriptive. It is reminiscent of a sick child in the night, a petulant half-cry, half-whine. It ceases, only to begin again. It has an irritating, annoying, penetrating quality. To fret is a childish term, but it describes the emotional reaction of many adults. The Bible advises us to fret not thyself. Quote left parenthesis PS 37:1. This is sound advice for the people of our time. We need to stop fuming and fretting, and get peaceful, if we are to have power to live effectively. And how do we go about doing so? A first step is to reduce your pace, or at least the tempo of your pace. We do not realize how accelerated the rate of our lives has become, or the speed at which we are driving ourselves. Many people are destroying their physical bodies by this pace, but what is even more tragic, they are tearing their minds and souls to shreds as well. It is possible for a person to live a quiet existence physically, and yet maintain a high tempo emotionally. Even an invert can live at too high a pace from that standpoint. The character of our thoughts determines pace. When the mind goes rushing on pell-mell from one feverish attitude to another, it becomes feverish, and the result is a state bordering on petulance. The pace of modern life must be reduced, if we are not to suffer profoundly from its debilitating overstimulation and super-excitement. This overstimulation produces toxic poisons in the body, and creates emotional illness. It produces fatigue and a sense of frustration, so that we fume and fret about everything from our personal troubles to the state of the nation and the world. If the effect of this emotional disquiet is so pronounced physically, what must its effect be on that deep inner essence of the personality known as the soul? It is impossible to have peace of soul if the pace is so feverishly accelerated. God won't go that fast. He will not endeavor to keep up with you. He says in effect, go ahead it, you must with this foolish pace, and when you are worn out I will offer my healing. But I can make your life so rich, if you will slow down now, and live and move, and have your being in me. God moves imperturbably, slowly, and with perfect organization. The only wise rate at which to live is God's rate. God gets things done, and they are done right, and He does them without hurry. He neither fumes nor frets. He is peaceful and therefore efficient. This same peace is offered to us. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give unto you. Quote left parenthesis Joe 14:27. In a sense this is a pathetic generation, especially in the great cities, because of the effect of nervous tension, synthetic excitement, and noise. But the malady extends into the country districts also, for the airwaves transmit tension. I was amused by an old lady who, in talking about this matter, said, "Life is so daily." That remark certainly spoke volumes about the pressure, responsibilities, and tension of daily life. Its persistent, insistent demand upon us is provocative of pressure. One wonders whether this generation of Americans is not so accustomed to tension, that many are in the unhappy state of not being comfortable without it. The deep quietness of woods and valleys, so well known to our forefathers, is an unaccustomed state to them. The tempo of their lives is such that in many instances they have an incapacity to draw upon the sources of peace and quietness which the physical world offers. One summer afternoon my wife and I went for a long walk in the woods. We were stopping at the beautiful Lake Mahonk mountain house, which is set in one of the finest natural parks in America, 7,500 acres of virgin mountainside in the middle, of which is a lake lying like a gem in the forest. The word Mahunk means lake in the sky. Eons ago some giant upheaval of the earth cast up these sheer cliffs. You come out of the deep woods onto some noble promontory, and rest your eyes on great valleys set among hills, rock-ribbed and ancient as the sun. These woods, mountains, and valleys constitute what ought to be a sure retreat from every confusion of this world. On this afternoon as we walked there was a mixture of summer showers and sunlit hours. We were drenched and started to fret about it a bit, because it took the press out of our clothes. Then we told each other that it isn't hurt a human being to get drenched with clean rainwater, that the rain feels cool and fresh on one's face, and that you can always sit in the sun and dry yourself out.